here we go again.
Hi, it's Frostfire here. So over the last few days, I've been getting hands-on with the new PS5 DualSense Edge. And today we'll be making some comparisons to the standard DualSense and the Xbox Elite Series 2. Asking the question, is it actually worth the money? Let's find out. First, we have the hard-shelled plastic case, which feels smooth and solid. After opening, you can see we have the Edge controller, which does look a lot like the standard DualSense. Two sets of back buttons, one in a half dome shape and the other in a lever shape. In the middle we have the stick module replacement, great for 1, competitive players, 2, anyone that gets stick drift, or 3, if the stick is completely buggered. 2 sets of dome thumbsticks in different heights, along with the standard sticks already attached, the USB lock mechanism, which is great for ensuring your cable doesn't come loose in the heat of battle. In the top section we've got the USB A to C long braided cable, which is great for playing and charging simultaneously and also doesn't get tangled. Another cool feature is if you pop down the flap in the back, you can leave the controller charging inside the case. So before we get into the details, who is this controller actually for? Well, as you may have guessed already, the feedback and drive to make this controller came from esports players who wanted the same ergonomics as the DualSense, but with more customization and the ability to swap out problematic areas without the annoying expense of having to buy a completely new controller. However, even though the main target audience are professional gamers, the longevity and customization can get from this controller can benefit any player that takes their gaming seriously and wants to improve their performance. So what are the key design and spec differences? The front-facing buttons are aesthetically different, with white symbols and directional inputs on the black instead of the grey on white with the standard DualSense. The trackpad is different, coming in black, and it also has these perforated PlayStation symbols giving a slightly different feel to the trackpad. The L2 and R2 triggers also have the small PlayStation symbols, but here they actually provide some extra grip. From the joysticks down to the base of the handles, it's been streamlined and rounded off, removing the cut-off thicker design from the standard DualSense. The matte rubber feel has been replaced with a thinner, glossier one, and the trim, which is removable on the standard, is not on the DualSense Edge. The glossy plastic cover that covers the stick modules is prone to fingerprints and actually cheapens the look, as opposed to the nice matte version on the standard controller. Now in terms of dimensions, both the standard and Edge controllers come in at 160mm wide, 106mm high, and 66mm deep, so no difference here. But in terms of the weight, the Edge is 55 grams and 16.4% heavier, coming in at 335 as opposed to 280 on the standard. So to change the stick caps, you just lift them up and off, and to replace, just line up the cap notches with the stick and push till you hear a click. Regardless of the style, the height is the more useful part, as when the high dome stick is used on the right position, alongside higher stick sensitivity, it can drastically improve your aim, especially in online multiplayer first-person shooters. A worthy addition. So before we change out the stick module, why would you need to replace a stick module in the first place? Stick drift is the main reason. This is when your character in the game moves or looks around when you're not actually touching the stick on the controller, and ultimately leads to the repurchase of a brand new controller, and generally occurs through extensive or extreme use of the joysticks. The second reason is that it's broken and doesn't work at all due to impact or an accident. So to get access to and replace the stick modules, you need to flick the release lever on the back of the controller. When you've done it properly, you hear the plastic cover pop off on the front. Next, pull the sturdy metal levers up. You should now be able to remove whichever stick module you want to replace or switch over. Once you've changed the module, push the metal levers down to secure it. Finally, reposition the plastic cover and push down until you hear a click. I picked up this extra stick module for 35 AUD. So you've probably noticed by now that the function buttons are actually attached to the stick modules themselves. So if you press and hold the left function button, a function menu will appear, which lets you use the front-facing buttons on the right to switch between one default and 3 other different profiles saved to your controller. You will also get an indication beneath the trackpad of which profile you selected from 1 to 4. You can also add up to 30 on the PS5 system. Likewise, if you press the right function key, a function menu will appear which lets you adjust the volume control with the up and down directional keys. And if you want to adjust the balance between game and party volume, more game is left and more party is right. However, the audio and party adjustments will only work with a wired analog connection. If you do want to get into the menus for remapping a particular profile, just hold one of the function buttons and press the options button. Here you can customize all your buttons and even turn some buttons off. You can't, however, remap the PS and trackpad, only disable them. And the X and O buttons must be mapped to at least one button each. As the function buttons can't currently be used for gameplay, they are also in a spot where if you don't use them, they don't get in the way of your usual gameplay finger movements. A great natural addition to the standard DualSense controller. So in terms of the adjustable trigger stops, there's 3 different settings. The long press, which is the same as the DualSense, the medium press, and the short press. If you're a competitive FPS player, you may want to leave it on the short press setting to register your shots in the quickest possible time. However, if you're playing a game that utilizes trigger resistance like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the downside of the medium and the short press settings is that it will automatically turn this feature off, decreasing immersion. For games like Returnal, which has the most intriguing trigger implementation, with a medium press Type 1 aim shot, and a long press more powerful Type 2 aim shot. After testing with the Edge, I can confirm the Type 2 shot still works on the medium and short press setting, but the Type 1 aim shot does not work on these settings. So if you want the adaptive triggers to behave the same as the standard DualSense, just leave them in the long press position. Overall, the adjustable trigger stops do give you an edge in certain games, mainly online multiplayer first-person shooters. Next, we have the additional in-game customizable back buttons. The buttons themselves come in 2 changeable options, a lever shape and a half dome. The lever option is the most familiar, being used in other Pro Controller setups like the Xbox Elite Series 2. Some say they are prone to getting accidentally pressed, but they work fine for me. The half dome buttons are also nice, and I switch between the 2 depending on which game I'm playing. But you can also easily put them on and take them off to suit your gameplay, or leave them off altogether. As expected, you cannot program multiple buttons to a single back button. But in terms of usability, I found the back buttons useful in the following games and scenarios. Horizon, mapping evasion to one of the lower buttons and being able to turn the camera while evading an enemy is useful, especially on bosses. For Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, so you don't have to take your thumb off the right stick at all, find your jump and slide to the back buttons. Shifting in GT7 with the lever buttons gives a realistic paddle shift feel and is a fun addition. In Elden Ring, where you want to be running a lot, keeping the circle button pressed down gets uncomfortable in long sessions. But with the lever buttons, it feels like you're just holding the controller and gives much less hand fatigue. This is where the Edge controller is true to its name, giving you an edge in certain games and scenarios. If you have any game scenarios where the back buttons are working well for you, drop them in the comments. Now let's look at customizing the stick sensitivity and dead zones. To start, you select which stick you want to customize from the drop-down menu. Then you can either adjust the sensitivity or the dead zone. To adjust the sensitivity, select a sensitivity curve from the drop-down. There are a number of pre-map sensitivity options you can quickly select and try out. These can be further customized via the curve adjustment slider. In terms of your aim stick, high tension is really good for first-person shooters. To adjust the dead zone, simply move the slider left and right to the desired percentage. You can also move the sticks around to see what feels best. It also gives a nice animation to show how impactful your changes are. Over time, you'll get a feel for what works. The dynamic curve might work great in one game and the precise curve in another. Now the good news is you can save all of these settings to different profiles and switch between them via the function button, providing great synergy between these 2 features. Next, the trigger dead zones. This essentially gives you a different customization option than the quick 3 settings we talked through previously. Here you get an input range that can be adjusted to a smaller arc, the remaining arc being the dead zone. You can choose to apply the same setting for L2 and R2 via the toggle at the top of the menu screen, or apply a different input range for each separately. Again, you can press the triggers to instantly feel what works best without having to go back and forth into games. Also, with the trigger dead zones, if your input range is too small, in some cases this may also turn the trigger effect off. And just like the stick sensitivity and dead zones, you can save these settings to your preferred custom profile. Depending on the player, this may give you some minor edge when pulling the trigger. You can adjust the vibration and trigger intensity by profile to either strong, the default setting, medium, weak, or off. This is the same for the trigger effect intensity. Note there is no instant feedback here. When using the microphone on the controller, the vibration and trigger intensity will be set to weak, and if you've adjusted the stop sliders, the trigger effect will turn off. Again, more of a personal preference that gives no competitive edge. In a previous video where I did a review of the PS5 2 years later, I got 6 to 8 hours of battery with the standard DualSense controller, which I was happy with. And I can confirm after using the DualSense Edge, I'm getting slightly less, between 5 to 7 for the same gameplay. Not what you'd expect from a Pro controller. But of course I have my existing standard DualSense controller as a backup. Both the standard and Edge controllers are compatible with the DualSense charging station, which has a quick and easy click-in design. It also looks good in my setup and only costed 49 AUD. You can also connect your long braided USB cable with lock mechanism if you want to keep the customization of your DualSense Edge for long sessions and keep gunning while it charges. Now the Xbox's Pro controller, the Elite Series 2, was epic when it was released back in November 2019. 3 years and 2 months later, Sony finally responds with their own Pro controller, the DualSense Edge. And a lot of the features you're seeing in the Edge have come from the ES2. These include the swappable stick caps, the back buttons, the adjustable trigger stops, the hard shell carry case, the quick access profiles, the extensive stick sensitivity and trigger dead zones, and the adjustable vibration. The main differences are the swappable stick modules are new with the DualSense Edge, and given stick drift has blighted a lot of ES2 controllers, a win for the DualSense Edge. Now the grips on the ES2 look and feel great until your hands start to get unusually sweaty. Compared to the Edge grip, which is minimal at best but doesn't do this and is surprisingly good for mid to long gaming sessions. Another win for the DualSense Edge. The ES2 directional pad can be swapped between a plus symbol and the 8-way signature pad utilizing magnets. One for the ES2. The Edge, just like the standard DualSense, has a trackpad which the ES2 doesn't, and can be used for gameplay and menus. One for the DualSense Edge. The battery life on the ES2 is up to 40 hours long, and even though no one needs 40 hours, it's certainly convenient, a win for the ES2. The ES2 case comes with a charging dock, unlike the Edge. You can also plug into the dock inside the case without taking it out, compared to the Edge where you pull down the flap and plug directly into the controller. A win for the ES2. And finally, the lock mechanism for the USB power cord only comes with the DualSense Edge. Due to the biggest complaint of the ES2 being stick drift, the fact that the Edge now has a solution for this makes it the clear winner today. But that controller is 3 years old now, so expect the Elite Series 3 to fix this and have a bunch of new features. So most competitive or serious gamers will be buying an Edge due to the replacement stick modules. The function buttons are also a very handy option to have during your gameplay session, saving you time getting your preferred profile selected and your game and party audio balanced. A 5 here. Next, the new back buttons and trigger stops will help you get a slight edge in certain gameplay. The sensitivity, dead zone and vibration customizations are a nice addition but can be lived without. A 4 here. The battery life is poor at 5 to 7 hours, and even though it's easily countered by plugging in via the long braided cable, it's a lazy job by Sony. A 3 here. The DualSense Edge comes in at 339 AUD. And if you're a pro or serious gamer, you'll like the back buttons, trigger stops and stick modules. Still, it's not quite as premium in looks and the materials used for this price point. A 3.5 here. In conclusion, the Edge is a good buy if you take your gaming seriously or you're a professional player. For anyone else, save your hard-earned dollars, as the standard DualSense is already a great controller and should last you until the PS6. Thanks for watching. Appreciate any feedback in the comments. Until next time.